Thank you very much for coming, all of you. We're so lucky. We're lucky to have two very talented men on the stage here who are going to read to you. We're lucky to be in this lovely place too, and we're lucky to have good weather tonight, so all of you are right in a good state compared to what it's been like. So the format tonight is this. Jim, who's launching the Immigrant Journey, is going to read for the first part of the evening. Dónall, who is both a poet and my partner in crime, we publish poetry books.
To put it simply, I'm the support band, okay?
And Dónall is going to read after Jim. Then we will have a 20-minute break where you can all refresh your glasses if you haven't done so far. There are books on the back if you'd like to look at them. We can sell them, we have a card thing. And then we'll come back and the chairs will be different because we're going to have an informal meeting after that where you, if you want to, can share your own stories because these poems are about stories. Both poets write stories really, but in poetry. So we're going to come back, sit round and listen, share stories. And so, without any more ado, the poets will introduce their own lives if they want to. I'm going to bow out and do my bit of videoing. So thank you very much everyone for coming in.
It's been very difficult to decide what to read tonight, what to include and what to leave out, because the subject of emigration is such an enormous one that I think I have had to leave out some quite important things. So the book has 50 poems in it, and they're all about aspects of the journey of emigration. And the first thing I want to say, which is pretty obvious, is that London is an immigrant city. If you walk in the street here, statistically, well over half the people who are walking with you will have their family and cultural origins outside of England. My parents were economic migrants from the west of Ireland, and they came here during the war. There was plenty of work, of course, then. And they settled in Cricklewood in northwest London. They were able to buy a house there in 1952, and I grew up there together with my three sisters. So, could somebody close the door? We had some West Indian neighbours, and we even had a few English neighbours. But mostly I grew up with Irish people and London Irish people like me. So London Irish means being born here in London, having an Irish cultural heritage and Irish family. It's different to being Irish because in my lifetime Ireland has changed from being an agricultural country to becoming the modern state it is now, and I have not lived through any of that. The Ireland that I remember doesn't exist anymore. But culturally, I look to Ireland. As a child, that uncertainty about identity was quite difficult and painful. Because I wanted to be Irish, but was I really? I wasn't English, but I wasn't really Irish either. So that brings me to my first poem, Union Jacks. One day when I was a kid at St Agnes, we were all taken up to line the Hendon Way, each of us with a little Union Jack to wave when the Queen Mother's car passed at its own convenience. Our mostly English teachers didn't think it a bit strange to be giving mostly Irish kids Union Jacks to wave at the British royalty. I took my Union Jack home and soaked it in water so that its colours would run and fade. Let it know what it was like to lose definition, to know acute uncertainty. Feelings as fresh now as they were when I held my flag still and did not wave. The dream of all immigrants, I think, is to have a better life for their children. But especially if those immigrants come from conservative tradition, they decide what the better life, what the shape of the better life is going to be, how you should behave, what you should say, what you should believe in. My parents had demands on them, not only from the traditional culture that they brought with them, but from the Catholic Church. The sort of opportunities that I had available to me simply were not on offer to their generation. They just had to work hard. That's what they did. When I was 12, for various reasons, I decided I wanted to be a priest. And what I hadn't foreseen about that decision was that it got me placed in a Catholic public school, a boarding school, which was a big shock culturally and emotionally. It was, I think, probably the first of something that happened in my life where there was a very abrupt transition between one thing and another, and they didn't really relate to one another. I mean, what I found in that boarding school I'd never come across, and it had no relation to what had gone before. And that has happened a number of times in my life, and I think it's no coincidence that that is exactly the journey that my parents made when they left the rural west of Ireland in the 1940s and came to the big city. So, I'm going to read the second poem. Dislocations. A sea separates one place from another. It is a sea that can be rough and angry, but even when calm, you lose sight of the one shore before the other will appear on the horizon. So you cannot have it both ways. My father certainly never accepted that and expected that I would not either. I set out to create a series of harbours separated by the sea, a sea that would sunder one from another, so that you could not retrace your journey, stretch a cable, build a bridge, or otherwise connect one with the other. I was going to live with the truth that life is a whole series of dislocations. But, as it turned out, I could not live with that, and like my father in his own way, I embarked on doomed voyages that were intended to mend the breach, and to find the living connection between one and another. And finally, I understand that the connection is grief and mourning. Unfortunately, no friends of mine are not welcome at my door. So while we're on the impact of trauma, I'm assuming that most people know that there was a catastrophic famine in Ireland in the 1840s. Over 1 million people died. And 1 million people who survived it emigrated. And many of them died because they were weak and diseased on the famine ships. The people who actually suffered the famine were from an oral culture. So in the districts where my parents came from, which were particularly badly hit, they were probably native Irish speakers. Well, in fact, I know that my great-grandparents were native Irish speakers. They were probably illiterate, and they certainly didn't write things down. So their records were held in songs and stories. What records there are of the famine were written by well-meaning outsiders. And there are no songs, and there are no stories. All there is a profound silence and absence. I've thought more and more about that as I've grown old. And I know that there is a bottomless grief in me which has no explanation. When my Uncle Mike was hungry, he used to say that he had the Fergorta. Now, I had no idea up until very recently what the Fergorta was. But the Fergorta is a phantom that appears when there's famine, an emaciated, starving man. That was the only reference that I'd ever heard in my family to the famine. And even then, I had no idea that it was a reference to the famine. And I'm not sure that my Uncle Mike did either. I just thought it was a funny phrase. So I'm going to read the next poem now. Fergorta. Those who suffered the famine could not be known by those who wrote things down. Generations of practice have taught the sufferers subservience, avoidance, and secrecy. They are in a place of absolute silence. But see, when he walks across a room, those who knew his father know the father again in the way the sun seems to slide sideways across the room, as if waiting, judging. The father is known in the son's body, a knowledge inaccessible as bone marrow, but just as vital, warm and living. And when he prepares food, the fiery tension of his mother's anxiety, the violence of her hidden terror and rage, lives again in the songs he sings himself to still the unease. Famine child, as his parents were, who brought its shadow here to the high, unblinking walls of London, who taught him with silence that this was so, something that cannot be processed, that is, as sober witnesses at the time attested, beyond anything you can imagine. In my last few years of living at home, before I left for good, I was already doing artwork, and I think there was a lot about me that my parents just couldn't understand what I was up to, and especially artwork. And somehow, I can't remember how, but I got a hold of a paint by numbers setting. Paint by numbers was that you would get a landscape or a portrait, and it was all done out in areas with numbers in. And you would get a set of very dilute oil paints, also numbered. And you put so that you do all the number 6 areas with the number 6 colour. So I had one of these, and I changed all the numbers on the colours just at random, and then I painted the picture. And I ended up with a landscape which was kind of a little bit sinister. But my father said, at least you could see what it was supposed to be. And I think this comment sums up my father's irritation and bewilderment that I couldn't just do something normal. My mother stayed out of my room on the whole because it was always such a bloody mess. But occasionally she'd go in there and she'd tidy up. So I'd come home at the end of the day and the still life that I've been working on was gone. I had a nice clean table, there, table. So, the next poem is about that. I'll wait for a second. Conversation with my mum. What can I do now, Mum, to make this better? Worry a bit more about other people, she says, and a bit less about yourself. Try and be a bit more useful. Don't be so sodden lazy. Tidy up your room, I've never seen such a mess. And throw out all that rubbish on the table, the spikes and the queer shapes. What the hell is it supposed to be, anyway? That's my mum. Throughout the early part of my adult life, the relationship between me and my father was extremely difficult. There were times when we didn't talk at all, didn't see each other, and in a way I think that was really unfair because it was inevitable. He was a man who had a deep commitment to very traditional values, and he had a son who wanted a different life, and we just clashed about it. When I was around 30, we began very tentatively to try and make some moves to repair some of the damage we'd done, but then he died suddenly. So, of course I regret the fact that we couldn't have that time to try and make things a little bit better. And I feel shame about the relationship that we made together. But this next poem is about the aftermath of that. It's called Ceasefire. If you had lived beyond that 70 years and 10, if you had not been who you were, and I not either, if we had not stood in such furious opposition, hating with the strength of fathomless love. I am each brick in this wall, each generation of thought sprayed carelessly on my surface, only to fade and peel as time scrapes past. I cannot hold you by the hand, nor you I, and no words exist that have not already fallen between us. You would have tried to listen above the so-called silence of what could not be said. I know that. We would likely have settled for some truce, some ceasefire. I had an uncle, Jim, who I'm named after, of course. He was my godfather, and when I was a child, he was my favourite uncle. I think about him a lot because I think if Jim had the sort of opportunities that I had, his life might have been very different, and only one generation separates us, but he didn't. He didn't fit in with the restrictions of his life, and I think he took to drink to manage the frustration and anger that he felt about that. He was a pain in the arse when he was drunk, as he was a lot when I was older. A cousin of mine once told me that he, my cousin, he was asking about me to Jim. He said, why didn't Jimmy come out in the buildings with the rest of us, as if somehow I had been disloyal. And he told me that Jim had said Jimmy had brains and he used them to get out. But there was no out for Jim. My Uncle Jim. My uncle had a slipped disc, agony even when it was getting better. He ground his teeth through the night and in the morning tried to get his trousers on without bending his back. An impossible task it was, but I do not remember him asking for help. The men on the job allowed him to break up early to make the tea and to fry eggs for their breakfast on the end of a shovel. But when I went out on the job with him, I was ashamed that my huge, strong uncle was only a tea boy. Loved brother, it says on his grave. It stands as the days and nights pass in the sun and in the rain. The first job I ever had when I left school was a garden labourer, 3rd class. I worked in Hyde Park, actually I worked in Hyde Park Corner, and for anybody who knows that part of the park, they might know that there's a small building on the boundary of that park. It's a Victorian Greek temple, and it has the same kind of quality as Doctor Who's TARDIS, which is much bigger inside than it looks from the outside. And we used to have our tea breaks in there. And I was in there one day and I was talking to the guy at the same table as me, and I said that I was an ex-Catholic. Whereupon an older Irishman leaned across from an adjoining table and he said, "You're never an ex-Catholic. You're a lapsed Catholic." As I've got older, I've come to realise he was right, you're never an ex-Catholic. But I don't like that I'm a lapsed Catholic. There was no lapse. So I've come with 2 short theological poems in memory of this man who tried to put me straight. The first one's called God. Look, someone has to be in charge of the afterlife. It's a scary thought that you get there and nothing has been organised. No hierarchies, no schedules, just wandering about not knowing what to do for the rest of eternity. Jesus, at least this life ends. The second poem is called Everyone's Welcome. The Catholic Church got rid of our ancestors, sent them off to heaven or the other place. We will meet our loved ones again, they say, when we too cross over. No ancestors hanging around close by and aware, not owed anything by anybody, except perhaps our prayers to help them if they've got stuck somewhere. Because if you're bound for heaven, there are a number of places you might have to spend time in on the way. If you're bound for hell, though, you can go straight there, no problem. They won't even check your passport. Now, in heaven, you might find us less questions if you were a bishop than if you were, say, a prostitute. In hell, there's none of that. Bishops, prostitutes, all the little mean people, and the spectacular criminals. Everyone's welcome. But don't think your achievements will get you any special favours or privilege. It's a very egalitarian place. I'm going to finish with this poem. So I had a teacher in primary school called Miss Healy, and like a few of the other teachers in the school, she was a brute. And one day we were going to do spelling. She said, "Pull out your exercise books and write now on the cover." We all said spelling, and she wasn't willing to give us that, so she said vocabulary. Knowing that none of us would know how to spell that. Vocabulary. My great-grandparents were native Irish speakers, remote enough not to have been caught and punished. Their children learned English. This child learned Posh, the language of the conquerors, the administrators of empire. Those who are so happy to know their place that they do not even know that they know. I got so many words. I took them from the dictionary, the Oxford English mostly. Prise them out with a tiny crowbar and keep them in my wallet. Thank you.
So, the one word I remember Mikey saying to me, and I don't know where he plucked it out of the air because it's an archaic word, it's just not in circulation. So the word was Ullastraw. And that's the one word of Irish I do know. Does anybody know what Ullastraw means? No. Ullastraw means, listen carefully now, Robbie. Ullastraw means the day before yesterday. Okay? When you tell that to English people, go, what? What do you have a word for the day before? And a Chinese friend to me, what's funny? We also have a word for day before yesterday. So, this is called Grandma Cree. You'll have to excuse me, but I always start reading with a blessing for my wife, because a wife is a blessing. And this is called Grandma Cree, which means love of my life. Ullastraw, the gra galista. Achanish, the gra gakin lud gakin art. My heart's love. The day before yesterday, your love unknown to me. But now, your love, everything, everywhere. Uncle Michael was the treasure trove of my childhood. He was a gorgeous man. He was playful, he was funny, he could make up stories no end altogether. And it was Michael, my sister and my dad recited things to me, but Michael showed me how to turn the world into words. And that's what he's doing. So this is called Uncle Michael, alias God. I used to follow Michael around the farm like a little newborn duckling. And he'd be talking to me and I'd be talking to him. And my aunt would say, "For God's sake, Michael, will you stop filling the child's head with nonsense? Can't you see he believes everything you say?" By God, I did. Uncle Michael, alias God. His hands tobacco stained, twisted and gnarled like an alive piece of wood. Scrawled gestures across my mind as the sick calf bucked in his arms and his quiet strength calmed. "Shh, shh, suck, suck," he crooned, and the sound soothed us, and the veins like vines ran up and down his arms, pumping crude life like a sudden sketch to suggest the meaning, the gist of rather than the meaning of things. And he walked, and I ran towards Granny's garden like God tending Eden. And the gate, a little horse, sighed at his hand, and the leaves murmured like worshippers in a church congregation, and the sunlight genuflected through the trees, and the trees wore apps, socks and apples. A tablecloth was laid on a loganberry bush, and the young tree gave herself to him, broke tenderly in his hand, and the knife whittled and whitted, and out of the branch came a man. And he told me, and I believed him, because he was good as God and strong, that the little wooden man, the silent statue, had been waiting all the time, already made, waiting to be released from his prison of wood. "All things," he whispered, "all things are waiting for you to call them to come out, awake them, create them." The rhododendrons were blue with amazement. At this revelation, a dragonfly walked upon the water. A butterfly became infatuated with a flower. Me, I watched as his hands talked, explaining things that could not be said. And he took my hand in his, and I understood, flowed like a little stream into his big river, felt God close, near at hand, and smiling. Now Mikey had two expressions that he always had. He put his tongue in cheek, literally, and he tipped his hat back, and he'd always say, "Be the hokey," or "Be the holy Dublin." So this is called Be the Hokey. My sister was killed in a bus crash, stationary bus, Green Isle Hotel, and a drunk driver came along and crashed into a stationary bus. She was the only person killed. So the world abandoned me at that stage. I went from living my life in glorious technicolor to black and white. Uncle taps me on the head. "How are you in there?" The only one who could walk into my mind to see how I was. He'd take my grief, tear it into pieces, scatter it to the wind. Then he'd take me by the hand, "Let's see where the happiness is." And always he'd find where the happiness was hiding. Whether it be in a wildflower or a nest of blue eggs, or how he showed me how to see the world in words, and wonder always flew to him, perched upon his shoulder. And oh, his lovely laughter and his catchphrase, "Be the hokey." Oops, sorry. And we were asked to imagine somebody and the smell. And this is called Maker of Days. You will always be oats. That smell spilling out of a split sack in an empty barn. A dance of dust motes like a spell, trapping summer within its crumbling walls. You being you, whatever the weather. Water sprung from the ground, its gurgle of coldness, the chitter-chatter of hens gossiping among obsolete machinery, blue eaten with rust. Dock leaves next to nettles, calm the pain far from the maddening stings. Always your laughter amongst the ordinary, everyday shipwreck of things becoming and unbecoming themselves. You, the maker of days in the lost land of summer. And he was a bit of a diddle, and he would do anything and make anything up. It was very surreal being with my uncle. So there's a famous song called Carrick Down. I don't know if anybody knows Carrick Down. Very famous Cork song out there. And it's about the field at the bottom of our farms, the old Bui. And the song is about that. And I'm even in the river. As a kid, I was amazed. How can I be in a song? So this is called Sing in the River. Walking with my uncle was never the ordinary process of perambulation in order to get from point A to point C. We would sing our way west into the field as if to tame it, soothed with sound. And carried down, the heat is brown, we'd sing to it. The clouds are dark, o'erardnally, the grass listening with its 1,000 ears. And the field would swoon and fall down to the river at its border, which, as it happened, was the real-life river of the song. To kiss the slumbering on of we, as if we had sung it into existence. And we would roll ourselves down over and over until we arrived at its dizzy waters, dangling our toes in pure song. And now, with a quick uncle wink, let's walk home backwards. And backwards home we'd go, just for the laugh of it, the yes of it. Confusing cows and a few scattered clouds, trees and hedges tiptoeing away from us, the 5-bar gate with the sweetest, wildest strawberries at its feet, proclaiming, is it Magyar or what? And the next day, off we go, walking, eyes closed, in a darkness of our own making, to sing its song to the river chuckling over stones to itself. And the next day would be backward, with eyes closed, led along by our own laughter in the odd mystified mood. Farewell, we tell the sleepy river, farewell, leaving it dreaming in a sunset. Shh, shush the footsteps, shush, shush is walking backwards. And Dónall swore, Ior, we'd part no more, a storm agreed. Shh, shh, shh. That's the area now. And then if you're a townie like me and you're in the country and there's country dark, you can't see your hand, it's in front of your face, your body just evaporates and all you've got is consciousness and thought. This is called Go West, Young Man. I'm heading west, wherever that is. I march off into the distance of field and sky. West is where my uncle is. I cut through the heat haze, my uncle's dinner wrapped up in a scarf on the end of a stick, as if I am running away forever. Tea slops in an old milk bottle, with a piece of cloth as a stopper. I stare into the empty air, as if suddenly I will discover there, west, this way. My Auntie Nellie's instructions still stamped on the inside of my stupid skull. Go west into the field with your Uncle Michael's dinner, and tell him that, me too terrified to tell her I don't know where west is. Typical townie. I search the farm field by field till I finally find him sprouting out of the field with a cloud attached to his head, beside the broken rickety gate with the tiniest ever wild strawberries grown. So this is where west is. Why didn't she say so in the first place? This I know. Why send me like a fool on a child's errand? My uncle devours everything except the scarf and the stick. Tells me to go south to where Uncle Shawnee is and tell him, oh no. This is about my other uncle, my Uncle Shawnee, who gets eclipsed by Uncle Michael, because Uncle Michael was so astounding. This is called Centaur, the mythological beast. Hiding in the hay, me, a terrified little boy, and my uncle, like a terrified little boy. The voices in his head tell him to be afraid of all strangers' changes. He's been like this since the day his dad, my unknown grandfather, died. My aunt's voice searching for us, searching us out, her shouts like bloodhounds, hunting us down, her words angry and cruel, her voice slurring us into Dónall, Shawnee, as if he had fused into one being, a metamorphosis of us. The hay cooks us, and we swelter in our hidey hole. A chicken sits on top of my uncle's cap, as if his mind had materialized into this shape. He rocks himself and rocks me. Shh, boy, shush, comforting both him and me. Don't leave me, he clucks, words scattered round him like newly laid eggs. I settle into this silence, my aunt's threats freezing us in this terrible heat. His chest hair tickles my nose. The cut on my left big toe throbs through the open sandal. My uncle cries in fear. I wipe away the tear with the dirty edge of my sleeve. We escape to the field, Westfield, me riding his shoulders, transformed into a legendary creature that only exists in myths, fleeing from the realness of reality. Now my Auntie Nellie was a strange woman. She was sort of locked into place in the farm, and if we were drawing or we were writing, she'd bring out her 9-year-old writing and say, my teacher said I had good handwriting too, and she sort of seemed to resent any playful thing that we did. So we would say to her underneath her breast, oh, Nellie the elephant packed the trunks and said goodbye to the circus. Off she went by the company clump, 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 clump. The head of the herd was calling far, far away. Auntie Nellie died of drink, loneliness and whatever. Not necessarily in that order. On the farm that was our young days, summer holidays, cast her youth like so much pig slop to the squelching grunt of cow dung days, moo cow lowing years, until the dust collected and settled in the corners no one could reach. Time left her like a holy picture high above the mantelpiece. See the children take the coloured cards in their hands, go play fish in the pool, scream snap, laugh at who is left to be, old maid, not me, it was always me. Time never took her hand like a lover's touch. Time only waited for her. In her loneliness she read and reread and lived on Aldous Huxley's island. She said, this said everything. Years later, when she reads like a fictional character in someone's story and time no more mattered, I travelled to her island, touched her loneliness, felt her longing. Auntie Nellie died of drink, loneliness and whatever, not necessarily in that order. Said goodbye to the circus, going far, far away. This is still Auntie Nellie. This is sad Valentine's for breakfast. Oh my, how Red Cock struts, thinks he's a sultan, striding in and out among his harem-scarum hens, talking to themselves like some low, senile, sentimental souls. Foolish fowl, they lay eggs for gentlemen and kids on long hot summer holidays. They hide their eggs like broken hearts, like old love letter secrets, safe in unseen places. But see Auntie Nellie, willy-nilly as a fox, stalked the chickens and exposed them, cruel as the news of the world. See her raid the haystacks, backseat of the old car, rain rusting machinery, her apron pregnant and precious with the warm and brown gift of eggs. Red cock crows loud against the morning marigolds, while children's voices babble sleepily into wider wakefulness. Love letter secrets staining their lips. Sad Valentines for breakfast. This is my granny, who was almost blind by the time I knew her. So, the only Eden. Granny, unable to see, would build me touch by touch with her blind fingertips, search for the face she would create. Here my cheekbone coming into being, there an eyebrow newly born, here an eye, there a philtrum, sculpted from sunlight, hewn from nothing, her blind seeing, fashioning me anew, her fingertips butterflies, forming this living portrait of the face I own. Her fingers feeling for each nuance, each tone, the music of me plucked from thin air. One moment I am not, then I am all there. I made all the more real, more realer than I could ever be, emerging from her fingertips as if I were God's Adam, and this her tiny garden, the only Eden. It's called The Pathway of Her Song. Granny's garden, she's in there somewhere, only her song visible, camouflaged by her ripening gooseberries. Granny sings to the summer. I follow the path of her song, pillowcases and towels drying on bushes and branches. Granny and the birds sing. I step on each note, a pathway through the air. Granny's garden overgrown with time. Her song still rests upon the air. Granny's garden, she's in there somewhere, hidden by death. I step upon each note, still following the pathway of her song. This is called The Fox, the Whale, and the Wardrobe. When my sister died, I was lost in the world. I hide from the world, I hide from your death, hide in my auntie's wardrobe. gather the darkness about me, dissolve into the nothingness I have become. No one knows where I am. No one knows who I am. Not even me. My auntie's fox-dole's beady eyes alive with death. Ah, little boy, you join us in this dark. My auntie's whalebone corset, smelling evilly of pink plastic, its white bone escaping and poking me in the ribs, welcome me to their land of the dead. Whale and fox show me their dreams, the seas and forests of their lives lived in the long ago. My sister's death haunts me, all through the ages I have become. Here now in Porto, high above the Douro, I finally write out the sorrow of my life. I still hide in a wardrobe in deepest, darkest Cork, or up above in the tallest tree I can find, the land like a map spread out before me. The fox and the whale join me in my darkness, more frightening than theirs. The seconds fading into nothingness, the moments rusted into place. Now somewhere in the future I could never have managed, I return to the ruined cottage, tree piercing the roof's heart, invading the room of where I'd been, the old wardrobe still holding the clothes of the dead, Auntie's Sunday's best, Uncle's smartest suit, rotten now, eaten by time. Oh, little boy, you've come back. The foxhole whispers in my ear, one eye missing, the corset nothing but a bone. And I cry for the death of summer, I cry for the death of them all. The fox and the whale join them in this darkness they could not have ever envisaged. The little boy could never have imagined the man I have become. I come to comfort the 9-year-old I was, this 67-year-old self, trying to make amends for all the pain he had to endure, crying to a heaven not willing to hear him. His tears, my tears, I gather the darkness about me. And finally, this is half in Irish, half in English, but I'll translate as I go along. My wife and I longed to have a baby, and we were grateful for practicing, but alas, no baby had manifested itself. And then we fell pregnant, just like that, all by ourselves. So this is called, and she was finished, and I used to sing to her belly all the little scraps of Irish that I knew. Doing the sula, close your eyes. Cuddle go long across sea. Sleep until day, my gentle love. Cuddle go solve, sleep peacefully, peacefully. I rog and Gaelic shot is rocking my green shafi. This moon will rise, the sun will set. Arag is graw igoni, fair and love always. Gach iha is gach law is gach iha. Every night, every day, every night. My plurin, my storing, my mooring, my little flower, my little treasure, my little darling. Akanish, cuddle go solve, sleep peacefully, gently. Gafanya and lay until the break of day. The Misha or the Tave, with me by your side. Losing our baby late into the night, holding this little thing that only attempted to be human, unable to let go, I clasped the fetus tightly in my hand and buried it in the dawn of our local park, under a recently planted red rose bush. In my grief, flower and baby became one, and night after night I climbed over high railings and even higher stars to talk to her in the dark in Irish, or sing my love is like a red, red rose, or cry. Almost got arrested one night by an Irish cop, drawn to the sound of Irish emerging from the darkness. Guessed he let me go because it wouldn't look good on a charge sheet. The defendant was talking and crying to a flower in Irish. Eisht, eisht, listen, listen. Dinna egin ekina, someone is crying in the darkness, in his darkness. Phil, Philaruno, oh, oh, Philaruno is not imi own. Philarum a kushla sto, oh, oh. Agus chifik to a glow. Thank you.